Welcome. This is Behind the Business, a live discussion of being creative for a living. So whether you are a freelancer, whether you are running a studio, it doesn't matter what you are. As long as you're being creative and you are independent, that's where we're going with this one. This is what we're going to talk about. Brent currently works full-time at one place and also works double full-time for me. So, so he knows both sides of the coin, and he will be able to chime in. He's also much younger than me, so he is also a good resource for us in this conversation, where he will be the voice of the youth and the voice of people who have questions, as he normally is. So I just wanted to chart out, you guys, like what my path has been. So starting off in the mid '90s, right? There's four things that are important to remember when you're an independent. There's creativity level, there's money level, then there's stress, and there's bill levels. And as you progress through this, you will see that these things tend to change a lot. Once starting off, right? When I started off, I was in my teens in the mid '90s, and there's not really a lot of responsibility in the world when you're a teenager. Especially if you are lucky enough to have a decent home life and not a lot of shit that you have to deal with. And I was lucky enough to have that. So when I started working, in my early teens, you could see the blue line: creativity, very high; everything else, very, very low. No stress, no bills, no money. So, more money, more problems, right? So as time progresses and you can see how things change, you can see 95 to 99. This is like early years of freelancing. As we get into the early 2000s, things started to change a little bit. And I started to understand the world a little bit more. I started to branch out, doing a lot more legitimate work for record labels and local businesses and things like that. I really started to become more of a business at that point. So by the time I got into college, I already had a few years experience. By the time I graduated college, I already had like a professional amount of experience, which was great. So by the time 2005 hits, you could see how things change. Stress level goes way, way up. And that kind of has a lot to do with the fact that when you are a young kid and you're doing this stuff, like I said, there's no mortgage. You don't have to make sure that you have something to eat every night. You don't have to make sure that you have clothes, shelter, like all these things that if you're lucky enough to have, you got them. As soon as you go out into the real world, you realize things change rapidly. And you can kind of see creativity. I think for a creative person, it doesn't really change that much. If you're a creative person, you're a creative person. It's just a matter of how do you use it, and how do you kind of deal with life as being a creative person and, being creative on a daily basis. You'll also see kind of like in this realm here, as I started to age a little bit, the bills went up, started to pay for little things here and there. And then eventually, living on my own and having to take care of myself and, subsequently a family, things change a little bit. You'll notice that money generally is pretty low for the most part. If anyone has been an independent for any amount of years, you know that you're basically poor for the majority of the time until you figure out what your niche is, or you figure out how to kind of make those connections with clients, and how do you make the business a sustainable thing. And right before all this stuff happens, you'll notice a dip in creativity. And I think what happens with that is you start to get overwhelmed with the reality of these things. So you'll be more likely to run into a creative block because your brain is just not functioning the way that you want it to. There's too many things to worry about, too much real life, too much adult stuff, too much real world, crushing down on you. So it makes it a little bit harder. But as we progress, 2005 to 2009, these are like core years for me building a business and really kind of understanding it, not to mention the great economic recession collapse of 2008, which was right smack dab in the middle of that. So that wasn't fun. That hurt. Any kind of movement that I made upwards was killed pretty quickly by that. So that's a rough place to really think that you're starting to, kick things into gear. By the time 2010 to 2011 came by, life changed. I got married in 2009. we were planning on buying a home, and, bills went way, way up. But at the same time, I also started renting studios, and I wasn't just working from my own desk anymore. So there's bills coming in from all over the place. But you'll also see stress will follow right along with that. But creativity starting to go up, and so did money. The more and more I got comfortable with this, the more stress I had, the more bills I had, but the more I felt comfortable being creative and learning how to be creative for a living, pay my life, through being creative. And then once I hit a certain point, I understood kind of how to manage my life and how to manage my business. So you could see there's kind of a sharp drop off of bills there too. So the reason this happens is because there's some stuff in there I realized I didn't need. What did you say, Brent?
I was going to ask, how did you get your bills higher than your stress? Right there.
Well, that's a really good question. You know what happens is when bills go higher than stress, I feel like there's a certain amount of logical, reasoning that happens in your brain where you're just like, okay, this sucks. And you get to a certain point, but you come to terms with the fact that it sucks. And you're just like, okay, I can live with this. I can deal with this. So you get to that point, but eventually they both kind of hit their peak and they come back down. Once you kind of figure these things out and you understand, like, okay, this is what I can pay, this is what I can't pay, this is what I need, this is what I don't need, all those things start to kind of dissipate. And then you can see the more and more comfortable I got living this lifestyle. Now, please keep in mind how long I've been doing this until things started to kind of work out. So until like the year, like 2015, like I was a working professional outside of school for 10 years at that point. And only 10 years in, after that, and after my initial like 7 or 8 years prior to that, did I really start to see a lifestyle change that I felt good about. Creativity went up, the amount of money that I made went up, the stress went down, bills went down. I got smarter about how to manage my money. I got smarter how to manage my projects. I started to work with people who understood. So it's like after you're around for a while, you really kind of, you go through a lot of hills and, peaks and valleys, and you understand, how hard this can be, but also how hard it doesn't have to be. You get into a really good rhythm, and you can work with that, And then, of course, right here in 2020, stress level goes straight up. And I think we all know why that is. But this is kind of like the path that I took. And there's stories that goes along with all this, but we'll save that for another time. I want this to be more conversational, and I'll let Brent talk a little bit more after this. But I wanted to show you guys kind of like this, my rudimentary infographic of, how all these things work together and kind of how haywire things go when you're really trying to make this happen. So what we'll do is we'll have a few questions up front. Brent is here to moderate. He'll read the questions and make some comments here and there. And then towards the end, we got a few that we're just going to rattle off pretty quickly. And then when we're done, we'll, if you have questions or anything like that, we'll get into them. We'll answer as many as we can. So let's start with the first one. Brent.
How do you determine billing rates, and how do you decide whether to charge hourly or on a project basis?
How many times have you asked me this question?
Yesterday, I think. Too many times.
So Brent and I have been working together how long now? The number always changes, but how long has it been?
I think it's been almost 6 years.
Almost 6 years. I don't think that's true, but almost 6 years, he says.
Close to.
But it's one of those questions that keeps coming up, and it's like, how do I do, like, every time that you enter in a new like phase of your design experience, you have to ask this question again and again. The more time you spend in this industry, the more time you have to figure out what the hell you're doing. So there's 3 different ways to do it, right? Hourly, daily, and per project. Typically we do per project, right? I mean, There's no reason for us to do one of the other ones, but that's more because we run a studio here. If you are a freelancer, it can be any one of these things. So you can be hourly. You could, and it depends on the types of clients. Daily is an interesting one too. Sometimes people ask for your day rate, and sometimes it's as easy as figuring out your hourly rate and multiplying it by 8 or 10, and that's your day rate. And then per project, which we have a little bit of a formula for, which we'll get into, but those are the 3 ways to do it. So hourly, right? Trying to figure out how much you cost in the beginning is really tough, just in general, because you don't know what you're worth. You kind of always undervalue yourself. One thing I will say is that no matter what your hourly rate is, remember that someone is coming to you to do this job because they cannot do this job. If they could do this job, they wouldn't be coming to you in the first place. So don't forget that your value is there the second that someone asks you to do something. And that's an important thing to remember, because a lot of people forget that. If you're a rookie, you're just starting out, 35 to 50 per hour, pretty fair. Not the greatest thing in the world, but not terrible either compared to most people's jobs. You know, professional, 65 to 125 an hour, I think is a pretty good range. And then a veteran, 150 an hour and up. I mean, some designers start getting into lawyer prices, you know, like $500 an hour. You know, what are you going to say about it? Like, if you're around long enough and people want you, you can get away with a lot. But a lot of, you know, you have to put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it to begin with to get to that point. So it's not like, you know, you're buying a yacht right out of the gate. Brent, where do you think you fall in this when you quote jobs on your own?
Man, it changes. I think I undervalue myself a lot at like every job that I do. I charge professional, but my initial reactions to charge like a rookie price, right? And and then spend way too many hours on the project and hate myself.
Always. Oh, and that's one problem I think a lot of people do, is that they're like, shit. I mean, I do it, like we all do it, because you want to over deliver, because again, you keep thinking that you're not worth what people are paying, and that's just like a stigma of the culture almost. You know, it's like, everyone always says, like, you wouldn't ask your doctor to work for free. You wouldn't ask a mechanic to fix your car for free. Why would you ask me to work for free? And it's just like that same old trope that happens over and over again. And it sucks. So like, we have to all work together to be able to make sure that that is not, you know, that doesn't become the future of our industry. Like, you want to be respected, you know, you want to feel valued. And then, you know, when you get up to a daily rate, you know, sometimes it's even better to just overshoot things sometimes, because you'll have people start to talk to you about, like, what's your day rate? If you just said 8 hours and it was like $100, 8 hours, like, is $800 worth the stress of working in someone else's building or whatever? You know, sometimes it's good to just give yourself a little buffer zone just for this. Like, a lot of designers are introverts. A lot of designers have anxiety. Like, I don't know if it's the creative brain that kind of does that to us, but like, you should give yourself a little padding just to give yourself some room for the amount of stress that you deal with in those scenarios. You know, there's also kind of like those extra hours sometimes that, like, you'll get an email at like 8 o'clock. Hey, can you fix this real quick? And then they expect that to be part of your day rate. Like, you don't want to get into those awkward areas, at least not at the beginning, when you feel weird, like, hey, you know, I kind of did like 2 hours last night and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, if you're not at the point yet where you just said, okay, I also did 2 hours now. For the most part, clients will understand that. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that yet, that's another reason why building that in is a good way to go. And then we get the project fee. Go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, no, like early on, I feel like it sounds dumb, but you want to have like as little communication in terms of like what's expected, right? You kind of just want to put out what's expected and like not have to ask, or especially ask for more money, right? That can be a killer.
Yeah. Generally, would you say that you're a shy person, just in general, outside of business?
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah.
Like
definitely.
In life?
Maybe not as shy as I get around money and establishing those.
As soon as money comes into play and someone kind of like judging you from a creative standpoint, it knocks you down a couple pegs, right?
It's also hard because you love the work, so that can be mistaken for like, you love to do this, you'll do it for free, right?
Yeah, good point. You know, and that's the funny thing is too, because like a lot of us probably would do it for free, you know, like if we all got paid $5 an hour, we'd probably still do it. And we'd be like, shit, like we're poor as hell and it sucks, but it wouldn't stop us from doing it. You know?
Yeah. Zach actually said that he stopped working for family too, because they tend to take advantage of his time, which is,
yes.
I mean,
yes, that is, oh my God, friends and family are the worst to work for, right? Because like they like will, and it's so funny too, because you would imagine that those are the people that would respect you the most, but they're actually the opposite.
Yeah.
They're the
definitely.
ones, they're the ones who are just like, well, you could do this, right? Like, yeah, you just like knock it out real quick. And it's so not like that.
Dude, and that's the thing is you can, but also like everybody's asking you to do that.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
So
everyone always asks. And then you got project fee, right? So it's like, sometimes it's better to do a project fee because it's just, you know, once you get into hourly and daily, like what if you're a slow worker and someone calls you out on it? What if, even worse, you're a fast worker and you get a week's worth of project done in the 2 days, and then they go, well, why are you worth this much? You know, like, why are you worth a week's worth of work if you only needed 2 days to do it? Why don't I just pay you for 2 days? Like, it's not your problem that you're fast. That is an asset. And that is a valuable asset because you can get more done in less time. People should pay more for that, you know? So one thing that I learned, the guy who I interned for taught me this, and this is many years ago, but it really does work out. So a good way to do it is choose an hourly rate, right? Pick an hourly rate. Doesn't mean you're charging by the hour. It's just a way to start figuring out your project fee. Then estimate the amount of hours that it would probably take you to do it. Then multiply that by 2.5 because you know you're underestimating your hours. If someone's like, hey, how long would it take you to do a logo? And you go 10 hours, you go, okay, yeah, but like, what about the 10 hours you spend like pulling your hair out and banging your head against the wall because you can't think of anything that you like? You know, that is part of the process. So between that, the creating and the back and forth, 2.5 hours sometimes just barely covers it. 2.5 times the hours just barely covers it. So if you get that and you say, you know, like I multiply this out and then that's your fee and it feels too high, you're good. That's exactly where you should be. If you do that and it still feels too low, you got to change something in that equation because you're not, you know, change your hourly rate, change the amount of time that you think that you're going to spend on it, because that is a really good way to at least start you to quote projects. Once you get comfortable with it, it's a little bit easier to gauge like how much is a logo, how much is a mural, how much is a website, you know, how much is an icon set, all those things, you know, or even like a t-shirt. Like a lot of t-shirt designers have standard prices. It's like, oh, it costs this much for a t-shirt, $500 for a t-shirt, $1,200 for a t-shirt. If you're lucky enough to work with some of the big companies like Nike and stuff like that, you can sometimes get like $2,500 or $3,000 for a shirt. Sometimes it just depends. You know, you feel your way out. There's nothing wrong with going a little high and then having the client come back and say, hey, can you do this much? If you hit that spot, that is actually a really good place to be because you know you're getting your maximum value that way. If you're doing a t-shirt for Nike and you say, oh, I charge $400 and they go, cool, and that's it, then you're like, oh, I charge way too little because they didn't even budge at that. So they were probably expecting to spend way more on you, and they probably valued more than you even valued yourself. So think about it like that. It's all about the value that you give to the client. Brent, have you ever used this formula before?
Yes. I feel like, so you think it's always bad if a client comes back to you and says, good to go? Like you think in terms of undercharging and things like that?
For the most part, every time that a client has come back to me and said, good to go, I kick myself a little bit.
What if they just really want to work with you? And it's like,
you can tell the difference, I think.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes a client will be like, okay, you know, like they'll have like a slight hesitation or something, and they know that they want to pay for the good stuff. You know,
I did this on a project that you had recommended, and the project ended up because I felt like I was getting way overpaid.
Yeah.
And then it was like a year later that the project was closing, and it was just like a horrible experience. And I spent way more time like emailing back and forth than I had gotten paid. And I think it was like breaking even or still losing some, but it was like, I couldn't imagine if I was doing this for half the price.
Yeah, and you never know when one of those clients will pop up. Like sometimes clients are great, and when clients are great, our job is great. But when clients are bad, it makes your whole life miserable. It's not even, it doesn't make work miserable. It makes your life miserable. You go to sleep thinking about it. You wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. You know, it happens to all of us, and it happens a lot.
Yeah.
So this is here, pro tip, right? Give yourself negotiating room. So quoting high never hurts you. And it's not about being greedy. It's just about knowing that you're worth something. And there is no real way, like there's no set standard for an independent artist to quote what you are. Like it's just what it is and what the people who are paying for it are willing to assign value to, you know? So it's like, if I say I'm worth $1 billion and there's a client that says, yeah, I'll pay you $1 billion, that's how much you're worth, you know? And it's just, and that's kind of like what it comes down to. Now, are other artists worth $1 billion then? Yes and no. So it's like, there is no true standard there. And that's one thing that I think people get hung up on a lot is, what is the standard? You know, like how much does a doctor make? How much does a teacher make? How much does a police officer make? There's standards for that. But for what we do, there is no standards, because just like the work is creative, so are the payments. You know, sometimes it's about bartering. Sometimes it's about making relationships. Sometimes it's about, you know, setting yourself up with a good reputation. It's not always about money, but it is about value. So there is a difference there. You know, that's something to remember. It's value. It's not money that you're making.
So, anonymous question here. What is a good estimated project rate for a branding project start to finish as an independent freelancer?
Depends on the brand. Always depends on the brand. If you got a small mom and pop shop, you could do a branding job for $5,000. You know, it could be, you know, like a little cafe in your neighborhood. They might not have a lot of money, but it might be a great project for your portfolio. And it's like, it's not that it's going to give you exposure, but what it will give you is a really in-depth case study that other people who have more to spend will see and will want to pump more into. They don't know how much you got paid. No one should ever know how much you get paid for a project, so that you can, like, that air of mystery is the best thing that you can have as a designer. If it's a big project, you could see it turning into $100,000 easily. You know, you figure $20,000 for a logo, you know, 5,000. And this could be on the lower end too. 20,000 for logo, 5,000 for stationery, you know, 10,000 for collateral, for another, and all these things, you know, signage, if it's a restaurant, menu design, you know, like there's all these things that start to add up. It makes me think of the London 2012 Olympics when everyone went crazy. They're like, the branding sucks, blah, blah, blah. Why did it cost, I don't know, it was like $4 million or something like that. Why did this cost $4 million? And it's like, well, you don't realize one logo gets applied to literally 4 million different objects. So don't forget, clients also have to pay for the usage that they're getting out of their logo. So if someone has a logo that is getting slapped on a hat and calling it a day, it's just a hat. Like, how much could you possibly expect them to pay for something that they're only using one time? Now, if you have a big organization that has a logo that is going to have it on TV commercials and bus stops and, you know, like written in the sky with an airplane, they're getting a lot of mileage out of that logo. And they are going to have, it's basically like if you charge them $5,000 for that and they use it to advertise and they end up making $1 billion off of that, guess who got screwed on that deal? And it wasn't them, you know? So it's about being fair about that value. And it's about being fair with, you know, what you're giving them. And a lot of times too, it doesn't always have to be branding. Sometimes it's like campaign assets. And what people will do sometimes is have licensing. So you'll say, here's the design cost $5,000 and you can license it for TV, web, and, you know, merchandise for a year. And that's another $5,000 for the licensing for a year. If you want it for 2 years, say it's like $7,000 in licensing. And then if you want it for, you know, indefinitely, you could say it's 10 grand, right? So that's where you can kind of start making up some money also, where it's like the work itself is only 5, but they want to use it for X amount of time and do X amount of things with it. That's where you start multiplying and adding on to how much that project can cost for the client.
Sometimes giving like a B option, ABC option kind of thing.
Yep.
Can help persuade somebody.
You give them room to move, and then they'll say, well, and that's one of those things too, where it's like, say the first year is 5,000, 2 years is 7,000. You're not doubling every year. You're kind of giving them a break, and it's an incentive for them to buy it, to get more and more off of you. So that way you'll get that higher range of cost, coming back to you. So a $5,000 project can come back to you as a 12 or 15,000, and you're still doing the $5,000 worth of work. So you have to think about that too. And again, this is not about greed. This is about value. The other thing is this business is very hit and miss. When shit happens in the world, we all know right now, certain things get cut. Design gets cut. Creativity gets cut. I don't know how many people are on this call right now that maybe haven't worked in 2 months. This is what happens, so you don't get a salary. You don't get benefits. You don't get any of this stuff that a regular employee would have. You're on your own. So sometimes it's not about greedy, and it's not even about value. It's about, prolonging your lifestyle so that you can live through the tough times. It's a bit, saving your money, being smart about it. That's one of the reasons why I never say no to work, because you never know when it's not going to be there. Sometimes things just happen, and it could be as simple as walking down the steps in your house and you miss the bottom step and you fall down and you break your right arm, and now you can't use a mouse, you can't draw, and you're out of commission for 6 weeks. What are you supposed to do? You don't get paid leave. You don't have health insurance to go to the hospital. Then you got to pay those bills, and you certainly can't draw or use a mouse. So accidents happen sometimes, pandemics happen sometimes. So you have to think into the future for a lot of what this stuff is.
Or move to Canada.
Or move to Canada.
Premium healthcare.
You can move to Canada too. But Brent will be standing there and not let you in because he wants all the healthcare for himself. You're on mute, Brent.
What if a client has no budget?
If a client has no budget, there's two options, right? If you love it, is it worth it to you to do it? It's one of those things that, I had a client one time that didn't have a budget, and I would just really wanted to rebrand them. And I reached out to them and I was like, I would love to do the rebranding for you guys. I love your product. I love everything about it. No offense. I think your branding is hurting it, and they were just like, yeah, no, we totally agree. We'd love for you to do it. And it's just, that's kind of like a passion project. And a lot of times passion projects turn into real projects. And not only do they turn into real projects, but that client will see your dedication and your enthusiasm, and they'll start name dropping you to their friends. So again, value, not money. If you see that there is value in a project like this, if you see that it has legs, that's when you take it and you run with it. It's important to understand that you're constantly looking at your future with this. It's the same thing with design in general. If you come up with a sick design and everyone rips it off, that sucks, but you always want to stay ahead of those people and not let them get in front of you. Because if they're standing on your shoulders using your design work, and then they start getting better and you're still kind of stuck in that one area, people will start looking to them to lead or to design because they're the ones who took it and ran with it. So you have to kind of future cast a little bit when you're doing this stuff. And that's working for free. It's that old design cliche where it's just exposure. Sometimes exposure is worth it. It's not that it's never worth it. Sometimes it's really obnoxious and rude for someone to ask that, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is helpful, and sometimes it does get your foot in the door.
And you're answering questions that you're not even looking at.
Exactly.
Nailing it. This might be jumping at.
The other thing is too, the other option is to just say no sometimes. That's it. It is okay to say no. It's important to know that. Sometimes it's okay to say no. Just don't burn a bridge. You don't ever want to burn a bridge. If someone says something really obnoxious to you and hey, can you do this for the exposure? Don't go and blast them out on the internet and be like, look at this asshole, because sometimes that person who's asking you to do it for exposure is an intern or a rookie, or it's their first time and they don't realize that they're hurting, you know, the design industry by asking a question like that. And then 5 or 10 years from now, that person learned a lot of lessons. Hey, guess what? That person's like, you know, creative director at this other studio now. And they remembered that you were an asshole and like put them on blast on Twitter or something like that. And they're never going to hire you, you know? So don't let some people's mistakes turn you into the bad guy. Always take the high road with that stuff, and always make sure that when you do it, you do it in a very classy, mature way. Let them down easily. If they're jerks to you, just remember it and just keep moving on. I think
then they burned the bridge. You did.
Let them burn the bridge. Don't you ever burn the bridge. Leave those roadways open for you.
This might be jumping ahead a little bit, but do you include contracts for every project?
It is jumping ahead a little bit.
All right. It's kind of, all right.
So again, reminder, never burn a bridge. So we'll get to the contract thing. Well, I mean, never burn a bridge no matter what. There are very, 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 very small instances when it is okay to burn a bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if it's someone who is fundamentally inhuman, you're never going to want to deal with that person. So yeah. I think in those scenarios, like if someone's like, hey, guess what? I got this really great baby trafficking business that I'm setting up. Can you make a logo for it? Then you're just like, whoa, like, please don't ever talk to me again. Please leave me alone. You know, but if it's someone who's just like, hey, can you do a CD layout for $100 and you feel offended by it, don't be like, fuck you, man. You know? So it's a very, very small scenario where that comes in. But yeah, I mean, never say never, I guess. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you persuade a client to take risks?
This is one of the most important things that a designer can do, because our job is to look like we're doing the sickest work ever for all clients all the time. And a lot of times you have a client that just knows that they love your work, but doesn't understand how to take a risk or how to be cool or how to feel interesting or whatever. So I have a little kind of like mind game that I like to play with the clients that don't really know what they want. So take, for instance, that creativity is a scale of 0 to 100%, right? The client's current design is a 0. The client's expectation is maybe like a 10%, right? Your expectation is always 100%. I got the sickest idea for you. I'm going to kill it. Don't you worry. Clients will push back to about 20% because they're just like, okay, I'll budge a little bit, but I'm not budging that. I'm not going that far. So what you want to do at this point is you want to start making minor compromises. So if you're at 100% wacky level, bring it down to 90%, bring it down to 80%, bring it down to 75%. You know what I mean? And bring it down a little bit, but do not go down to the 20% level. Do not immediately, you know, bend down and say, okay, I'll take this. That's fine. Never, ever, ever do that. Start to like nudge a little bit in the downward direction, but stay as close to 100% creativity as you can. And what that will do, as long as your client is reasonable, is it will start to stretch them out. So imagine like a cold rubber band. If you really want it stretchy, you just keep stretching that thing, you know, and the warmer it gets and the more kinetic energy that it gets, the more, you know, like elastic it will feel, the bigger it will get. You need to start stretching out your clients. So the more and more you show them of crazy work, even, you know, like start peeling back the layers a little bit and getting down a little bit, they'll start to be more comfortable with what crazy work is. So they'll start to budge a little bit. So maybe they're at 20% and you show them 80%. So then at 80%, they go, okay, well, we can do a little bit more. Then maybe they're at 35%, right? Then you go, okay, let me fix something else. You take another thing away, still not a lot. So maybe you go from like 80% to 70%. And they go, okay, you know, that's not too bad. We can do something like that. But what if we take this away? And then, you know, before you know it, they're at 50%. Then you go, okay, let me do one last thing. I think this will do it, right? You take that one last thing away. Then you're at like 60 or 65%. And the client goes, yeah, I can live with that. I can do that. So what you've done is you've taken a client who was expected 10% of creativity and you've pushed them another 50 to 55% just by showing them little pieces, little crumbs of, like little morsels of creativity, and never letting your stance and your belief in yourself and your confidence in yourself waver because they got cold feet. So before you know it, you take a 20% job at the best and you turn it into a 60 or 65% job. People are going to notice, and especially when you have that case study and you present that case study, and especially if it's like a rebrand or something like that, people will see that you have made a significant leap with a client that maybe looks more difficult than anyone would even imagine. So even if it's like a new client or whatever, these are also personal lessons for you of how to speak to the client that doesn't get it, of how to, maintain confidence in your work. Because I think that's another thing that's super important. If you can maintain the confidence in your work, again, they came to you, you didn't go to them. They see your value. So if you maintain that confidence, you can explain every single decision that you make to them in a clear and concise manner. They will understand that this is coming from a professional that they should respect. Every time you make one of those choices, you explain what that choice is and why it's better than the thing that they're suggesting. Not in a shitty way, but in a good way. Like, I get where you're coming from. Here's a thought that I had, make sure that your language is always friendly, but firm. If you can do that, you can stretch every single job beyond the point of expectation. And that is a really, really, really valuable lesson that it took me a long, long time to learn. And it's a hard thing to master too. But once you kind of get try it out little by little and see how far you can push things. So before you give up and you just let things crumble and you go, well, there's a lost opportunity of doing something cool. Push it. See how far you can push it until you break or they break, the project breaks. Sometimes you have to lose a project or two to understand how this works, but it will be more valuable in the future. And this is something that I think is pretty evergreen that you can use for an entire career.
And do you think this is for any difficult client, really, not just in terms of pushing creative? Yeah.
Even for your good clients. Like sometimes a good client comes in thinking that they're going to get 75% creativity. Get them at 95%, 100%. These are the clients that you can really push beyond the limits that they even expect. So like this is coming from the place that you're dealing with, the non-creative clients. Mm-hmm. But there are plenty of creative clients that are willing to do cool stuff. And when you get those are the people that you can push farther than you would ever expect. And I think that is where you would get like the mega case studies for your portfolio, where you're just like, would you just look at how cool this is, And it also, those are the ones that really amp up your confidence, where you're just like, I know I killed this, and it's not about bragging. It's always about self-perceived value. Confidence goes a long way. For me, it took me a long time to gain any kind of confidence in what I do, or just myself in general. But by the time I got to that point, I will tell you right now that I am not the best designer. I'm not the best illustrator, lettering artist. It doesn't matter. What I think I am the best at is being able to explain my thoughts clearly, being able to connect with a client from an emotional standpoint, so that I make them feel like they're coming along and we're sharing this whole creative journey together. And when you can really connect with them and you make them feel like they're part of the process, and they feel like they're contributing creativity just as much as you are, mm-hmm. They're not. But when they feel like they are and you bring them along, that is a client that you have for life. That is a client that will tell you, every single person that they know, how great it was to work with you. And that is how, the name dropping and the, getting work by word of mouth really, really starts to take off. And that's how you'll start seeing a lot more clients come in. Roger told me you were awesome. Maria said you were great with this. Whoever it is, it doesn't even matter. You're going to start getting a reputation then for treating your clients with respect, and they'll respect that. When you have the clients that don't respect this whole thing, those are the ones that break. There are certain times where you shouldn't keep pushing it because it's never going to get anywhere. Sometimes don't waste your time. But for the most part, it's always worth a try. And I think
early on, like learning how to have those conversations and is going to be important to landing the ones that do let you.
Yeah.
be more creative.
Yep.
Because they've seen what you've, go ahead.
Sometimes it's about one client who says, I'm not going to be able to go this far, but I have a friend of mine who would love to work with you and they would totally do this. You know, so sometimes it's just about using it as a stepping stool to get to the next better one.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Can you talk about proposals, contracts, kill fees, and presenting your work?
Probably the worst thing that we all have to deal with is like the business side of this. So it's just like, yeah, we're all creative, we're all artists, but does anyone get into this profession because they want to be a business executive? I don't think so. So contracts, right? There are a lot of different ways to get a contract. And obviously I am not an attorney, but just to start it off, let's run through some of the stuff that's important. There's a statement of work. You know, if you have to write up your own contract somehow, it's okay to do plain language. You know, just as long as you cover yourself. So statement of work, what are the services you're going to provide to the client? Client responsibilities. What do they have to give you in order for you to accomplish your job? Do you need a bunch of photos? Do you need background story? Do you need copy to set the typeset on something? Do you need phone numbers and addresses to do business cards? Changes to work request. What happens if the client changes direction mid-project and now you have to basically start over? Does a $5,000 project still cost $5,000? Or does it now cost $7,500? So that has to get put in there too. Just in case a client does this, this is how much it's going to cost. Work schedule. Clients love to see work schedules. How long is this going to take? So a lot of times, you know, John, how long is a logo going to take? Logo takes 5 days, right? Just throw a number out there. Now, it would take 5 days if I had 5 straight days to work with it and I didn't have other distractions like other clients, family, friends, you know, general things that you have to do in life. So it's not always going to be the same. So you figure out, okay, taking into consideration this logo, I want to research it. I want to sketch it. I want to play with it. I want to see what it looks like on the top of a letterhead or on a t-shirt or on the back of a truck or on an airplane or whatever. Give yourself some time. When you lay out your schedule, lay it out so that it is more time than you need to accomplish that. Usage rights. This is one that we talked about already. If there is usage rights, you know, sometimes if it's branding stuff, there is no usage rights. You just amp up your cost and you say, this cost also includes ownership of the artwork. Some clients are actually pretty savvy and they'll ask you like, do I have to pay a license for this or can I just have it? So keeping that in mind, whether it's branding or a campaign or t-shirts or whatever, make sure that you make that clear. Like the best thing is like if you do a t-shirt design for a company, right? Company blows up because of your t-shirt design and they use that one design on all their sweatshirts, all their hats, all their flyers, on their website, all the stuff. And you're just like, whoa, you just paid me to design a t-shirt. You didn't pay me to design your entire company. That's where all this stuff becomes important because that's just like when it's a Friday afternoon and you're like scrolling through Instagram and that one client that paid you $500 for a t-shirt, hey, guess what? They got 600,000 followers now and that one design is on everything. They just got you on one. So some people might call that greedy, but you're running a business here. Remember that this is a business and you want to allow yourself to have some sort of comfort because it is very easy in this business of being an independent creative to become a slave to yourself. And the more and more that you feel like, okay, I'm only worth this much, or I only think it should be worth this much, the quicker it can be for you to run out of money, not be able to pay your bills, come across hard times, and then be screwed. So it's constantly thinking about your future. Third-party fees. Do you need a photographer for it? Do you need an architect if you're working on a restaurant? Do you need a screen printer? Do you need a web developer? Like all these things should be worked in. Promotion is important. Always work in promotion. Once this is done, I am able to use this on my portfolio as a case study. Always, 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 always add that in. There are a lot of clients who will say, no deal. And that's because they think that you are using their name to sell yourself. Now, that is kind of true, but really what you're selling is your ability to make them look better. And clients might not get that, but that is a really important thing to remember. So when you're writing any contract, make sure that's in there. If anything, always make sure that's in there. Because if you get money comes and goes, you can spend money. You can get a friggin' bouncy house. You can buy 1,000 sandwiches for yourself. It doesn't matter what you spend the money on. It will disappear. But your reputation does not go anywhere. So a lot of these things contribute to your reputation and your future as a designer.
Do you ever break those? Does somebody ever say, don't use it in your portfolio, and you go and use it in your portfolio?
If you ever break that, if they say, I don't want that clause in there, take out that clause, but never add the clause in that says, I am not allowed to use this in my portfolio. Leave it open-ended. If they're not going to okay it, then at least leave the gray area there so that you can't get in trouble because it's in a written contract. That's anything that's in a contract that you can approve. Make sure there's not anything in there that you don't like, because it will come back to bite you, guaranteed.
Do you give the original files in the usage rights?
Only if they ask for it.
Yeah.
What I would say is you're only giving the finished product to them. If it's a JPEG, give them a flat JPEG. Do not give them a PSD. Don't give them an Illustrator file. Don't give them your drawings on a piece of paper. Don't give them your notebook. You know what I mean? Don't give them the negatives from the film. Don't give them the raw files. Don't give them the After Effects file. Don't give them anything. It's the final product. That's what they're paying for. If they want all the working files, then what they're getting is extra materials so that they can take your work and continue to reproduce it without you. So you don't want that unless they pay for that. Sometimes clients will pay for those files and say, can we have the working files? Then you say, yeah. Then it's about estimating how much they're going to use for it. So if it's a $5,000 job and they say, can we have the working files also? Sure thing. Now it's a $20,000 job, because that's assuming that there's maybe 3 more jobs on top of it that they'll use it for. It'll probably be a lot more than that, but that's where you kind of like undercut a little bit so that they will spend more. Does it matter to you in the long run? Maybe not, but then you're still making an extra $15,000 on top of it. Payment schedules and terms, very important. Get a deposit up front. Make sure that the client knows when they're supposed to pay. Termination, if the project is canceled, make it clear how much you're owed. Is there a kill fee? If there's a kill fee, is it 50%? You know, if the client's like, I have to cancel this project for some reason, then you're just like, okay, but you still owe me for the amount of work that I did. I generally like to do 50% plus. So if they cancel it beyond 50% of the project, it's kind of like 50% of the project plus kind of like the prorated cost of how much we did past that. And that's kind of up to you to word properly so the client understands how much they have to pay for. And then there's additional costs, revisions, late fees, rushes. If it's just like, hey, you know, we need this thing and it's, 7 p.m. on New Year's Eve, that's going to be tough. You know, like obviously it's not the same as like a Tuesday in May. This is something that is very important that you can communicate to the client that your time is also valuable. You know, you have friends and family to me. There's these things where everyone generally in the world is going to be taking off and then you're working. Like there's an emotional stress that comes along with doing that. And those things cost extra. So it's important to remember that. One thing you can do, and I will say this is helpful. If you can spare an extra $1,500 or so, $1,000, $1,500, find an attorney that will write up a contract that has all of this for you. Put it in legalese, whatever it's got to be. It's a really good investment because you can use it for every single client going forward. And you know this is done by a lawyer, by the law. So it's like maybe your plain English one is good for the first 5 years of your job, but then maybe some like huge like Fortune 500 company wants to work with you, and that's not going to cut it with them because they're like, hey, we need legal to review this. Where's your termination clause? Where is this? Where is that? Sometimes it's good to just, if you have the extra cash at one point, it's good to just like do it right and make sure that it's kind of ironclad and that you're not going to screw yourself in any way.
So do you include contracts then for every project?
Yes. Yeah. One way or another, a contract needs to be included. Sometimes they can just be the plain English ones. Sometimes they're the really in-depth ones. At this point in my career, it doesn't matter if it's like a $10 job or a gajillion-dollar job, they all get the same contract because it's all the same wording. You know, rich people don't get better wording than poor people. It's like we're all, you know, we're all in this together. We're all speaking the same language. You owe me this money. This is the work I'm going to do. Then the job is done. You know, like that's it.
So if you deliver the files, should you add to the contract that they can't make any changes without your permission?
Yes.
Like once you give out, but once you hand out those raw files, I feel like they might.
I think that's a good thing to throw in there. That's sometimes people might find that unreasonable, but sometimes I think there's a good chance that falls underneath the no raw files clause too, where it's just like, I'm not going to give you the working files. And also you can't change my work without my permission, because if they take your work and they run with it, it's essentially the same thing of you giving them a platform to keep changing it. So it's good to have that in there as well. Going back a little bit, proposals are super important too. Before you get to the contract phase, send a formal proposal, you know, brand it nice, you know, put your logo at the top, write up a little paragraph about what you're going to be doing, itemize your list of what you're going to be doing. Sometimes people go back and forth, right? Some people really like itemizing their projects. So it's like logo design, 2 t-shirts, 5 icons, website, 6 banners, this, you know, whatever. And then other people just like to write brand identity and then put the number there. So do you want to be transparent about how much you cost? If you're transparent, it's very easy for people to nickel and dime you and say, well, I don't want t-shirts and I don't need business cards. And then, you know, there's like $2,500 off your project. If they just see brand identity, $25,000, then it's just like, they can't argue it. They go, okay, is there any room to move in that? And then that's when you negotiate a little bit and you look and you say, how much do I want to take off? Do I want to either remove an item from this, or do I want to just take a little bit less money and do the whole thing? Because sometimes it's great to just do the whole thing and have it. Other times it's maybe not worth it to do all the extra little, like maybe you don't need to do 16 web banners. You know, maybe you could take that off and just be like, I saved you, you know, $2,000 on the moving 16 web banners or something like that. So that's important to get out there too, deciding which one you feel comfortable with. And then just designing them. Keynote is actually awesome for it. I use Keynote for a lot of this stuff. You can copy and paste logos and stuff right out of Illustrator. It maintains vector. You could do some nice typesetting with it. It's really easy and quick. You can copy and paste stuff. Like I do mood boards in it. I do proposals. I do contracts. I do everything in Keynote. It's like really, really easy, lightweight. It opens up fast. It doesn't bog down your computer. In design, obviously you have more control over, but like it is very bloated software to just put a proposal together with a couple images sometimes. So it's all about efficiency too. How fast can you get it done?
Should you charge for meetings, phone calls? Is that something you'd put in the contract?
Some people do. It depends. Like that can almost be like a nickel and diming type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know like some agencies that started doing that, and it's just, and they were like, you should do that. And I was like, yeah, I should. But, you know, sometimes you do things in good faith so that people, you know, respect that you're putting in a little bit more love into the project. Other times it's good for you to be able to do that because you can have it as leverage. Because if it gets crazy and you go, listen, I could be charging you for phone calls and emails right now with the amount of times you call and email me, but I'm not. So why don't you take it easy on me? You know, like sometimes you can use it from that perspective too. It depends on your comfortable, you know, like your level of comfort with the client or just yourself in general. I don't know if I'll ever get to the point of charging for emails and phone calls. Like sometimes I feel like it's not worth throwing that on there, but some clients expect it too. So it's a tough one. Like if you're dealing with a major company, you go, you know, $1,200 for communication, that counts as almost like meetings. Just because you're not meeting in person doesn't mean a phone call or a Zoom call or something doesn't count as that same thing. And that's your time. You can bill for your time on that one. So you can even just write that as a line item that says consulting, you know?
I know like early on, I worked for an engineering firm that like the first thing I did for them was build a website. And it was like calls every 15 minutes going like the littlest things. And once I added all those calls into the invoice, I didn't charge them for it, but I put like I'd have to charge on the next invoice. like communication became a lot more streamlined and a lot send
Yep.
in an email,
Yep.
figure out what you want to say before you call me.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And don't get it. Like, even if you're on a Slack channel, that's like a whole job to begin with too. Another thing you should do is, once you get the proposal in there and they sign off on it, you get the contract going, a client questionnaire is great. Have a standard questionnaire so that they can fill out all of the things, so you don't have to keep having the same conversation over and over again. Get it in there. What's your goals for this? How do you want to treat this? Is there anything I have to include? Is there anything I shouldn't include? What are some things that you feel are good, comparable projects to this? And what should I not do? All those things are super important. And it helps you kind of like read between the lines, because people will start to say things or write things, and you're like, oh, I see what they're getting at. Like maybe they say, I want everything to be clean, clean, clean. And then all they show you is grungy stuff. You're just like, okay, obviously there's a breakdown here, and you can pose that to them, or you can figure out a way to do clean and grungy at the same time. So a lot of that is important, I think. And just kind of bouncing back to like proposals. So if you have a template, it's good to make a template for yourself. Get an opening page in there with just like, saying like the description of the project, the date, contact info, overview of the project. What are you going to be doing? Get the deliverables list in there. What am I going to be doing for you? Timeline is good, an estimated timeline. It'll take 2 months to do this, and then another month to do that. And then a signature page. Just make sure you get your clients to sign off on everything. Because sometimes things get crazy. It's not even that you're being irresponsible, but you're just being you're so busy with stuff that it's very easy to forget sometimes to get a signature and to get someone to actually agree to it. So that if for some reason they go, oh, I don't remember saying that, or I don't remember doing that, you got it in writing. So it's in there. And then presentations too. Presentations, I do presentations in Keynote too, save them out as PDFs. But you could do, if you have a Squarespace website, you can just make password protected pages and make separate, projects that are just on one page. It could show video, picture, text, links, whatever. So you could do PDFs. You could do, website pages on your site. You could do, like, if anyone's ever used like Notion or Coda, you can build a page out of that and send that. You can even do like Dropbox Showcase, Google Slides. Any one of these things would be great to be able to show presentations, as long as it's consistent and you have a template for yourself. And then payment terms, also super important. Make sure that they know before you start this project, they got to pay you 50% upfront to secure your time in your schedule. Having it be non-refundable is also important, because it shows that you mean business. You're not about to screw around with their project. It's, sometimes you might feel weird about asking for that, but it is standard. Don't feel weird. It is a very common thing to have a non-refundable deposit for your work. Always get that up front, because sometimes people can just disappear. Or I had a client one time where they got into some weird legal dispute with one of their investors and had to declare bankruptcy. Had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with their poor relationship. And then, I at least had my deposit, but I lost everything else, even though the job was done. So that sucked, but at least I walked away with it with something instead of nothing. And then collecting money. If you can get some kind of invoicing software that has, like there's so many out there. I mean, from like, Harvest all the way up to like QuickBooks, FreshBooks, shit. I mean, there's a ton of them.
Don't you think, like, with that, maybe take some time, figure out which one's going to work best for you, because changing that later on sucks.
It does. Yeah. It's really, you take a weekend and figure out which one you like the best and which one suits your workflow the best. Shit, man. It's taken me like 10 years to finally end up at QuickBooks, where everyone kind of lands anyway, but it's been the best for the workflow so far. I used to use Hivage. Hivage was really good up until we kind of outgrew it. But anything that can receive credit card payments, with Stripe or, anything like that, whatever you can do to make it easier for people to pay you, do that. So you are positive that you are getting paid.
Oh, we got a question here.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to push your potential client to negotiate cost? This is what Laura asks. I've had the experience of sending a proposal without cost included. With the cost included, but if they can't spend the money, they walk away without negotiation. Is there a way to go ahead?
Yeah, no, that's something that happens every now and again too. If you're just like, okay, the project costs 10 grand and you think it's reasonable, and then they just don't get back to you, that sucks. But for the most part, that is probably going to be a shitty client anyway. Like sometimes I've had clients like that where we've even negotiated price and then they were just like, it's still a little out of our price range. And then like a year later, I see the project and the project's kind of lame. And I find out through the grapevine who did it and how much they charged. And it was like, oh yeah, they got paid like $500 to do that. So it's almost like, did you want to kill yourself over that crazy project for $500? You know? So
sometimes,
go ahead.
Sometimes like just in my emails, like I'll put, hey, look this over. Like, let me know if everything looks good. If you know what I mean? Give them the opportunity to come back to you and say.
Always. Hey, yeah. I always do that too. It's just like, yeah, let me know what you think. If you want to hop on a call and discuss it, you know, just leave it open for them to be able to say, you know, 10,000 is a little too much. I was hoping to spend like 6,500. If you're okay with that, $65. If you're okay with that, then that's great. If not, at least you have that ability to discuss why. They'll appreciate that too. You want to do some quick questions?
Yeah.
Let's do them.
Speed round. Any freelance tips specific to recent grads, junior level creatives just starting their careers?
Yes. Work hard. Work as hard as you can. It's when you come out of the gate, it's very hard to start this, especially as a freelancer, because I came out of college as a freelancer and I did not realize how much effort it took to get to the point of like, okay, I'm a regular worker. And it's not just, you know, it's not just like getting used to the situation. It's just like, you know, how good do I really think I am? How flexible do I really think I am? It's great to be able to, while you're trying to figure out how to get clients, do a lot of projects on your own and do these self-initiated projects and try to expand your reach into like, you know, just make something up. You know, redo a record cover that you liked or redo a branding as an exercise or something. Just stretch your muscles as much as you possibly can and really, you know, push yourself beyond the limits that you have normally worked so that when those projects do start to come in, you'll be ready for them.
Sorry, I got windows open here.
Nice job.
Yeah, messing up, man. Messing up live.
You're fired.
Do you ever find it challenging trying to juggle more than one client?
I think that comes with experience. After a while, you get used to it. And it's just like today, before we even did this, I was on the phone the whole day. I don't think I did a single ounce of design work. Yeah. But I mean, you got to do it. You know, it's sometimes you can break them up by days. Like maybe you want to work on one client Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday's another client, Thursday and Friday's another client. Or you can say in the morning, I'm going to work on this. Then I'm going to eat lunch. Then I'm going to work on this in the afternoon. Maybe I want to work at night. I'll do another project. So it's just about dividing up your time and kind of making it feel like manageable for your brain.
How do you cope with anxiety or self-doubt about your work?
It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
It's a matter of finding some successes in what you've done and honing in on those successes and making it clear to yourself that you did something, someone loved it, and it worked out really great. Now, the ones that you do that don't work out great could be your fault, could be the client's fault, could be timing, could be any number of reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all on you. The successes, sometimes you can take a lot more credit for those, you know, because you're like, okay, I gave the client something to work with. It's on them to do with it what they will. But even if it still looks good, you can still share that. You can still use it as a case study. No one needs to know that the business was a failure. As long as it looks good, people are going to want to, you know, have to work with you on that. So it's all about kind of like, you have to build up that confidence. The more you build up that confidence, the quicker the anxiety and the self-doubt will go away. And it'll always be there because we're creative and we're constantly putting our emotions on paper for other people to judge. Like, look at every rebrand ever. You think that every designer that works on rebrands that get torn apart on Twitter are like bad designers? Like, yeah, they're not. You know, for the most part, they're usually probably pretty good designers that either had a client that forced them to do something shitty, or they made a mistake, or they were in a rush, or any number of situations that cause something to look the way it does. That's not perfect, you know? So you could be on the highest level of what we do and you're still going to get shit on. So it's important to have thick skin.
Yeah. And also I feel like when I was able to separate like what is art and what is design, because if you can work on just like functionally this design works, you could be a lot prouder of something. It doesn't always necessarily have to be art, right?
I think so too. And you know, it sucks. It's like maybe it's because I kind of grew up with a New York sensibility or whatever, but the way that I approach every project in my adult years is that I assume that everyone is going to hate it. So I keep trying. Every time I design something, I design it with the expectation that people are going to find things wrong with it on Twitter. So every time I look at it, I go, okay, if I was a Twitter troll, what would I critique on this? And then I'm like super harsh on myself. And then if I can fix it, great. And then if I can't find anything, then I know I feel good about it. And if I put it out there and someone either finds something bad to say about it, I can be like, oh, all right, well, you know, that's, you got me, you know, or it's just like, well, I still feel good about it. So you can say whatever you want. I know that I put all the effort into it that I had to.
Yeah. I just send my stuff to you. What is the most challenging part of your career lifestyle?
At this point in my life, the most challenging part is being around for my family, because what I want, I love what I do, and I love doing it 24 hours a day, but I also know that I am a human being and the amount of energy that I have now will be limited someday. And I always feel like in order to live a comfortable life later, I got to work as hard as I can now so that I can have retirement or something, anything to take care of me when I'm not able to do this, take care of my family when I'm not able to do this. So that's where my head's at these days. It's just like, can I work enough to be able to take care of myself later? And during that process, can I still be a good dad, husband, son, brother, friend, you know, whatever, to the people who are important to me? Boss. Yes. That is something that is very tough to juggle sometimes, but you know, there's peaks and valleys with that too. There's times when, you know, my wife will just be like, I feel like I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. And she works with us too. Like, she's an art director here, but sometimes like we got to branch off and do other things, or she's with the kids or something like that. And I disappear because I got to handle stuff. And it's like, sometimes if you want to get paid or you want to get this project done, you don't have a choice. You got to work all night. You got to get up early. You got to be in the studio 20 hours out of the day. You do what you can to make it happen. But if you love what you do, it doesn't really hurt and you find ways around it.
Yeah. What do you wish you had known when you first started as a freelancer?
I wish I knew how hard it was going to be to start, because when I was freelancing in high school and college, it was easy because I was in school and I had another job. So I had supplemental income. I had stuff keeping me busy during the day. Once I started freelancing, it was just me alone at a desk, and that was it. And it was just like emotionally draining. It was draining because I didn't know how to get work. You know, I was just like, okay, well, all the work that I had that was keeping me busy was enough for me to live the part-time freelance lifestyle, but it wasn't enough for me to live the full-time freelance lifestyle. So I kind of wish I knew that. Did not know that at all.
So what is the best way to break into the industry then?
I would say the best way to do it sometimes. So what I ended up doing was I did the freelance thing for a couple months full time, and I wasn't quite there. So what I ended up doing was I got a job at a couple small studios, and just got into the flow and like paid attention to how they did the business. I paid attention to how other people around me worked. I started to make friends and contacts with people who were either clients or related to clients or people who, you know, I worked with, whatever. Once I got confident enough in that business idea, then I was just like, okay, I've seen enough of how this works to know that I can do it. And that's the way I did it. And it was a matter of, you know, some people came with me from the other studios. You know, some of the people from the other studios gave me work after that too. So that was super helpful. You know, sometimes it's worth it just to get a job somewhere, just to break in and then start to just like pull stuff from that.
I know though, for me though, that's kind of become not a crutch, but like it stopped me from fully committing, right? Because I do have paychecks coming in.
Right.
I don't have to, sometimes it takes just like going forward and kind of falling into the void and being like, I got to make this bill payment. I got to,
Right. It's tough. I would say if you're working a job currently and you plan on going independent, when you go independent, you should leave when you are absolutely at the breaking point of your freelance stuff, where it's just like the freelance stuff has taken over my day to day. So I work 8 hours at a studio. I work 12 hours at home. That's the point where you should make the jump. Until you get to that point where you can't do both anymore, you got to pay attention to that, because you don't want to say like, okay, I got, you know, like 2 jobs a week or something, and then make the jump and then be like, well, now I can't pay my rent. You got to be very cognizant of what that is. And it's important to know that you're going to have enough, you know, to keep you going, and then enough to like build and snowball into more stuff after that.
So then how do you handle stretches of work being slow?
Well, that's where the pricing and all that stuff comes into play too. Like making sure that you pad everything to be able to cover you for those rough times, for those rough patches.
I think both of us during those times, we have like personal projects.
Yeah. It's a good way to do it. Do you want to do a couple of quick Q&As before we get out of here?
Yeah, we've been going through them.
Oh, cool. Look at you, man. You're a good moderator.
Moderator.
I'll let you pick. Do you want to pick?
Yeah.
Questions.
Yeah. All right. Are there any reading materials you recommend to help out with the business side of freelancing?
Yes. Where is it? I don't have the book here. It's on my shelf somewhere. Emily Ruth Cohen. It's like no bullshit business or whatever. Just look up Emily Ruth Cohen. Her book is great. For the business side of things, it goes through a lot. It speaks to a lot of the stuff that we talked about in terms of contracts, proposals, how to deal with clients, how to grow your business, all that stuff. Fantastic. I highly recommend it as the #1 book to get. There are other books. I will warn you. There are books that say, you know, like the beginning of our studio, how we did this, how we did that. A lot of times you'll pick up one of these books and be like, you know, at first we didn't know what we were doing. And then we got a studio in Manhattan, and now we do work for Nike, and we do, you know, this and that. And it's just like, cool. What's the middle ground? A lot of books won't talk about that because it's not flashy and it's not interesting and all that stuff. But for people like us, where we want to know how, like, what are those missing steps? Mm-hmm. Emily's book is great. And it's just, I don't know if I can really recommend many other ones. In my book, Brand My Hand, I talk about it a little bit. So if you want to check that out, be my guest. Emily's book is the best for creative business and stuff like that.
So then what about books for inspiration or websites for inspiration?
That is up for everybody to kind of decide. I mean, like, one thing that I will say is that Pinterest has actually gotten really good because so many people use it now. It's just like, when it first started, it was like, okay, it's like the same 5 things I see everywhere else. But I think so many regular people started using it, and a lot of regular people that are saving things, not because they know it's aesthetically awesome. You know, like if you come across like a matchbook collection that's like so sick, people are saving it on there because it's like, oh, look at my vintage matchbooks. They're not doing it because it's like, look at the illustration on this, or look at the lettering style, you know? So that's pretty good. Like Flickr has a ton of those. It's a little harder to navigate, but really it's just like you find it where you can. I like to find it in people, experiences, storefronts. It's a little bit easier in New York because you got a lot to look at, but it's, movies, TV shows, anything that is being created by someone, you can pull aesthetics from. If it's color, atmosphere, the way people talk, the way people dress, storylines, all sorts of stuff like that. And then, nostalgia plays into that too. Maybe you used to skateboard as a kid. What were the skateboard graphics you loved? I love when people kind of like pull like things from their childhood that maybe you wouldn't expect, and they put a twist on them. So there's a lot of different ways and places you can grab it from. But I would say you got to just keep your head open and open, like leave it in sponge mode and literally suck up everything and everything, and use your phone. Like I snap pictures of shit all the time. Like it's just like, I just have like an archive of stuff. I just say cardboard box gets delivered to your house. There's like a recycling sign on the side, save it, all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you ever find you're saving those things and you never go back to them?
Yeah. Until one day where I'm just like, oh, I forgot about this. And then you look through all of them and you're like, oh, this shit is like so
3
good.
years later. Yeah. Do you ever worry that you've peaked as a professional? How do you personally keep that fire lit?
I used to think that sometimes, but I always try to extend goals beyond where I'm at. Like when the whole lettering thing came around, I happened to be doing lettering for years before that, and I couldn't sell it to anybody. Like people just didn't want it. When the lettering thing really hit and all of a sudden people wanted it and I had been doing it for years, I was like, I'm going to ride this wave as long as I can, but I knew just like every trend, it will crash down. And then all of a sudden there's going to be 1 million of us. And it's not just like 10 of us anymore. So it's like, a lot of it is just like, can I get this out of my system before the wave crashes? Yeah. And it's just, I always try to plan ahead. Like, what else am I? What else can I be? How can I use this to further my career? And I felt lucky because before the whole lettering thing, people would say like, Jon's a lettering guy, Jon's an illustration guy. That was not my business. I was a graphic designer. I was, a creative director, graphic designer. That's what I was. And that's where I always wanted to be. But I happened to be a puzzle piece that fit into that world really nicely. So I was able to use that to my advantage to like get people to know who I am and get some great jobs, meet some great people, work with great companies. And now
arguably, you're back last 5 years kind of.
Now we're back just like straight up graphic design. I still use lettering and illustration, all that stuff in the work, but that doesn't mean I don't use fonts. Doesn't mean we don't design websites. Like now it's everything,
I'm blanking on the name of that book that you use, but what are some great resources to help figure out prices for certain projects?
Oh,
this probably isn't useful, but
I don't know if anyone uses it anymore. The Ethical Guidelines book.
Yeah.
That used to be like the be all and end all of pricing, but like you would look at it and it would just be like, how much does a logo cost? I don't know how much a logo costs. And it would say a logo costs $40,000. And you're like, sick, $40,000. But my client has a lemonade stand at the end of the block.
Yeah. They're making $4.
Yeah. Like sometimes it just like didn't really translate. So it's like kind of good as just like a reference point, but some of the stuff sometimes was so far off that you're just like, none of this makes sense. Like if you're just like, okay, how much should a campaign cost for a moderately sized company? And it says like $20,000 and you're like, how does that doesn't make sense. If I'm going to be producing all this stuff for them, how is it not $100,000? And then you're like, okay, this is way too low. And then other stuff is way too high. And then other stuff is kind of on point. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't think you need that as much anymore. Cause I think, there are a few of us that are a little bit more willing to talk about the, how we price things and a little bit more open to like discussing costs, so I don't know if that works as much, but you could always try it. And I don't know if they print them anymore either though. So like if they stop printing them in like 2005, obviously don't use that because it's 15 years later, prices are much different now.
Just get it and times it by 5.
Yeah.
or because we're in COVID minus 20 grand off.
Either multiply it by 5 or divide it by 5.
Divide by 5, yeah.
You want to do like 1 or 2 more?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I like this one. How many pieces does a starter portfolio need?
Oh, good question. A starter portfolio, I think you're safe anywhere between the number 8 and 12 pieces. I think that's good. I don't think you ever want to show too much, but if you can show a solid 8 to 10 and speak to them, I think you're in a really, really good place. Like it's enough to keep someone's attention, but for them to not get bored. That is the key. As soon as someone gets bored, even if your work is incredible, they're just like, and then they forget. But if it's tight and it's short, you always want to leave them wanting more. So, be bold with your choices and speak to them, but don't go overboard.
Advice for people looking for a design gig during these COVID times.
God, just keep trying. Keep trying. Don't get discouraged, but use these times. Like if you're just sitting home organizing your closet every day and you're just like sending emails out and hoping someone gets back to you, forget about your closet. Your closet's going to be fine. Do some self-initiated projects. It's always about self-initiated projects. In the worst economic times, if you do something that is sick and someone sees it, someone will always pay you to do it. There will always be someone with money that wants to give it to you for something as cool as something that you do. If it's a self-initiated project, you have no art director, you have no client, you have no board of directors, you have nothing. You have no demographics that you're trying to hit. You do something that you love because you love it, that you're passionate about, and you put it out there and you share the concept behind it, the narrative behind it. You just put a little bit of, maybe it's a website that shows like a bunch of different things. Maybe it's an Instagram project, maybe it's a whatever. As long as it's a self-initiated project and you put it out into the world, someone is going to find a reason to love it and want to pay you for it. So in the meantime, while you're waiting for a job, do a job for yourself and do a couple of jobs if you have the time. And before you know it, someone's going to be like, I love that thing that you did. Can you do that for me? We have the perfect thing for it. So I would suggest that as a really good place to start.
And then also like right now, you might not be getting the projects that you want to be doing. Like I'm doing a lot of web stuff and like helping businesses set up online and things like that because everybody's doing that.
You just got to do what you got to do. Yeah, you got to do what you got to do,
Best 2020 jersey redesign, Pats, TB, Chargers, or Rams?
I really liked the Chargers stuff, actually. Yeah, it was actually, I like the lightning bolts on the side. I liked all that stuff. I think they did a pretty good job. I really liked it. The Rams could have been awesome. I think there's some stuff that they missed that I wasn't thrilled with. Pats, whatever. Jets, whatever. Buccaneers, I think they did a pretty good job. I mean, I'm biased. I work with them right now. I did not get to design them. Unfortunately, that was a Nike contract through and through. But I think they did a pretty good job. I struggle with the colors a little bit because like the red and the pewter sometimes fight each other. So it's interesting to discover the relationship between colors like that and how to make them pop and make them look good. But I think overall it's solid, it's traditional, but it's still pretty bold. So I think the Bucks and the Chargers are probably my two favorites.
I'm curious about this question actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which designers do you look up to?
I love the guys at House Industries. I always have.
Yeah.
They from the second I found one of their books, it was great because they were guys who were great at design, but they did amazing illustration. The lettering was incredible, and one of them always had like some hardcore and punk flyers in there, and I was like, these guys made for me, House Industries. I would always look to as my number one favorites. There's plenty of people out there now that are doing cool stuff. But I like their stuff. I don't necessarily like look up to them the way I always have House Industries, because I think House Industries is on a different level than everybody else. They are just so perfect, but so filled with such life, and some of the reference points are so interesting and so like artistically valuable, you know, like they're pulling from shit that should be in museums, you know, they're creating stuff that should be in museums. It's like every House Industries book is so, the attention to detail to every single page is incredible. You know, I know that sometimes I've worked with people who've worked with them before in the past where their attention to detail is maybe so beyond that, like publishers are just like, it's too much, you know? But like, I love that. I love going overboard. I love that even after all these years, they're still going hard, and their approach to it is still flawless and untouchable. So I would say House Industries, just like Ken Barber, Andy Cruz, Jeremy Dean, those guys are amazing.
Yeah, I seen like Jimmy Kimmel gave them like a man, crazy.
Yeah. JJ Jimmy doing the forward book, like come on. Yo, name me a designer that can step to that. Like no, get out of here.
No way. Yeah.
We could do one more, and then we have a little preview for something.
Podcast. That's a question.
It just says podcast period.
Podcast.
I'd say one thing about doing a podcast, doing, especially in these times, like we're getting to do this Zoom thing right now, but like when you're doing a lecture or you're speaking at a conference or something, you don't always get the chance to kind of talk to people the way you want to talk to them. You do a presentation and then that's it. This one, we tried to keep it more casual and more like, you know, like personal, like so we can talk to one another. Because I kind of hate when people stand on stage and just do presentations. I'd rather pick their brain and hear how they respond, you know? So when we do the podcast, I want it to be like people can ask us things like this, and we're not going to shy away from it. We're going to answer questions the way we would be if we're sitting at a table at a diner somewhere, just like talking shit, you know, keeping things like real and alive. And it's just like, no, we don't want to bullshit anybody. We want everyone to know that there's a reality to this. And a lot of times, you know, social media takes over our lives a lot, and we see the glamorous end of things. And that's not why we do this. We are about kind of like, you know, the reality. How did we get here? What are the troubles of this? What is the lifestyle like? What is all the questions that we talked about today? Everything that, you know, was a problem for us at one point, or is a problem for us today, or we think it's going to be a problem in the future. The stuff that is so hard to deal with that all we can do is laugh about it. That is what we can do as a community, is like lean on each other for that. We're competitive. We're, you know, empathetic. We're all these things. And that's kind of what it's there for. It's just like stress reliever. You know, I don't, you know, design isn't boring. Art isn't boring. It shouldn't sound boring. You know, a lot of times presentations get very dull, very drab. I want that to always be exciting. You know, like you don't sit in a studio and just like, you know, hand gray pieces of paper off next to each other. Color, vibrancy, story, emotion, all these things are important. So in terms of the podcast, that's what we want out of it. And with that, I want to thank everybody for their questions. Thank Brent for helping out, moderating this and adding his 2 cents. And thank the One Club and everybody there for setting this up. One thing we want to share real quick is that we did the branding for Young Guns 18. So we wanted to give you guys a little teaser and a little story behind it, because it's kind of fun. So let's jump over to this real quick. Oh my God. Here we go. So Young Guns 18 is built between the juxtaposition between the stress of life and the compartmentalization of design and business. So what you see here is actually an inverted drawing that was done with charcoal that came from the charred Australian wilderness that was set on fire, you know, what was it, 6 months ago? I actually worked with a gallery that sent out like literal charcoal that came from burnt trees and all that stuff from the fires to create pieces of artwork, to then, you know, donate for people to, you know, to donate to the gallery so that people could bid on it and just raise money. you know, for the aid of, you know, the Australian people who dealt with all that stuff. And this presentation, this branding was actually done using that same charcoal too. And I thought it was kind of good too, because it's like, we have like that mental stress, and everyone kind of deals with that emotional output of being this type of person and going through that type of stuff. So you can kind of see, like, we used a lot of that. So everyone that's going to be a part of this has like a unique drawing. The rest of the branding sits in a very clean space. And it's all about just kind of that juxtaposition between dirty and clean, and kind of like that lifestyle that we live of constantly living the two brain, left and right brain lifestyle. And that's a little bit of a preview of what you'll see soon. And then if anyone's under the age of 30, please, you know, submit your work, because it'll be awesome. And I was a young gun, and I would say that the Art Directors Club and the Young Guns thing is literally the only contest, or the only, you know, organization I've ever entered that I really felt good about. Everyone always made me feel welcome. It was great to be a part of it. And you know, it's continued to this day. This is what, it's been 9-10 years since I started, you know, directly working with the Art Directors Club, and, you know, through the One Club also, it's continued. So I think, you know, for me to say that too, I feel pretty good promoting it, and I'm honored to be able to do this. It's something I've always wanted to do, and hopefully you guys enjoy what you see out of it. And you know, thanks again, and I really appreciate everything. And thanks to the team with the One Club. Thanks for everybody for coming on, and you know, stay safe out there.